Under the moon's unyielding gaze, the frost etched promises of betrayal into the snow like veins of forgotten silver. Kaelin Frostwind stumbled through the veil of the wildlands, her breath a ragged ghost in the biting wind. The air here carried the tang of pine resin and decay, sharp as the thorns that clawed at her threadbare cloak. At 27, she had known the chill of rejection before, whispers in the pack hall, eyes averted like she bore the mark of some lesser sin, but this was exile carved in blood. Treason, they called it. A false whisper from a rival's tongue, accusing her of plotting against the Alpha's line. No trial, no plea. Just the shove into the borderlands, where the law of the packs ended and the wild began. Her boots sank into the snowdrifts, each step a surrender to the weight of isolation. The forbidden ground stretched before her like a scar on the earth's face. Jagged peaks clawing at the starless sky, forests of skeletal pines whispering secrets to the wind. She had fled under cover of dusk, heart pounding against ribs that felt too fragile for the storm brewing within. The moon hung low, bloated and silver, casting her shadow long and wavering, as if even it doubted her path. In her palm, she clutched the one relic of her old life, a small silver pendant, shaped like a crescent moon cradled in wolf's jaws, warm against her skin despite the cold. It had been her mother's, a symbol of the old ways, the dosa's quiet favor for omegas who bent but never broke. Now it mocked her, a tether to a home that had cast her out. The wind howled, carrying distant ueves that twisted her gut. Feral packs roamed these lands, the stories warned, beasts unbound by alpha command, driven by hunger and madness, tearing intruders to ribbons under the lunar light. Kaelin had always dismissed them as tales to frighten pups. But here, in the heart of the wild, doubt gnawed like frostbite. Her legs burned, lungs searing with every inhale of the icy air. She paused at the edge of a clearing, snow falling in lazy spirals, blanketing the world in hush. The ground beneath her feet trembled faintly, not an earthquake, but something alive, pulsing like a heartbeat buried deep in the soil. Then they came. Shadows detached from the tree line, eyes gleaming amber in the moonlight. Wolves, larger than any she'd seen in the tamed packs, their fur matted with ice and old blood, muscles rippling under pelts scarred by countless hunts. A dozen, maybe more, circling with predatory grace. Kaelin's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning the wind. She froze, the pendant digging into her palm until it drew a thin line of blood. This was it, the end they had sentenced her to, not by blade, but by fang. The air thickened with their musk, wild and untamed, and she braced for the lunge, the rip of flesh, the hot spill of her life staining the snow red. But the earth stilled. The lead wolf, a massive brute with fur like storm clouds and eyes that burned with feral intelligence, halted mere paces away. It sniffed the air, nostrils flaring, and the pack followed. A ripple of low growls that vibrated through the frozen ground. Kaelin held her breath, the cold seeping into her bones, her mind a whirlwind of fear and defiance. Why hesitate? She was no threat, no prize, just a lone omega, scent marked by desperation and salt of unshed tears. The brute stepped closer, its breath fogging the air between them. She met its gaze, unblinking, the moon's light catching the silver in her eyes that had once been called too soft for the pack's harsh world. A strange calm settled over her, born not of courage, but exhaustion, as if the Deusa herself whispered through the silence, "Stand." The wolf lowered its head, not in attack, but in deference. The pack echoed the motion, one by one, circling tighter yet yielding space. They knelt, forepaws folding into the snow, muzzles dipping low. The wind fell silent, as if the wild itself held its breath. Kaelin's hand trembled as she released the pendant, letting it swing free against her chest. Blood from her palm smeared its surface, a crimson thread binding metal to skin. What sorcery was this? Ferals did not bow, they devoured. Yet here they were, pledged in the quiet authority she had never claimed, their loyalty a riddle wrapped in fur and fang. The brute's eyes locked on hers, conveying not hunger, but recognition. A mirror to her own hidden depths, the omega fire banked beneath layers of shame. Distant shouts pierced the night, hunters from the border packs, drawn by her trail, their torches flickering like angry stars through the trees. The ferals rose as one, hackles bristling, a low chorus of snarls building like thunder. Kaelin stepped back, heart fracturing between terror and an inexplicable pull. These wild ones, believed incapable of allegiance, had chosen her. Not to tear, but to guard. As the first hunter's arrow whistled through the air, the pack surged forward, a wall of shadow and savagery, defending the quiet storm they had claimed as their own. The clash erupted like a storm breaking over the wildlands, fangs flashing silver in the moonlight as the feral pack met the hunter's advance. Kaelin pressed her back against a gnarled pine, its bark rough and unyielding against her spine, the metallic tang of blood already thick in the air. Arrows sliced the night, one grazing her arm with a burn that seared like betrayal's kiss. But the wolves were a whirlwind of fury, leaping, tearing, their growls a symphony of raw allegiance. The lead brute, the storm-cloud alpha of the pack, clamped jaws around a hunter's throat, shaking until the man's torch sputtered out in the snow, leaving only the crimson bloom staining white purity. She should have run. The forbidden grounds offered endless shadows, paths to vanish into the maw of the mountains. But her feet rooted, as if the earth itself claimed her now, the pendant at her throat pulsing with an unnatural warmth that mirrored the chaos in her chest. Fear coiled tight, a serpent of doubt whispering that this pledge was illusion, a feral whim destined to turn. Yet curiosity flickered beneath, sharp as the wind's bite. Why her? What quiet authority had stirred in her veins to command beasts that bowed to none? The hunters numbered 6, armored in steel and spite, their faces twisted masks under helms etched with pack runes. They were enforcers from the border clans, sense of tamed loyalty clinging to them like chains. "The traitor's here!" one bellowed, knocking another arrow, his voice cracking with the thrill of sanctioned violence. Kaelin ducked as it whistled past, embedding in the tree with a thud that echoed her fracturing resolve. The pack pressed them back, bodies piling in the snow like fallen stars, but the hunters fought with the desperation of those who served a crumbling throne. One broke through, blade raised, eyes locking on her with the cold certainty of execution. Before he could strike, a shadow detached from the tree line, not wolf, but man. He staggered into the clearing, cloak torn and bloodied, his form silhouetted against the moon's indifferent glow. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hair like raven wings matted by sweat and grime, he moved with the grace of a predator, felled yet unbroken. An alpha. She knew instinctively, the air around him thickening with the musk of command and sorrow, a scent that pierced her like frost through fur. His eyes, storm-gray and haunted, swept the fray before fixing on her, and in that gaze, Kaelin felt the world tilt. A pull deep in her core, instinctive as the tide to the moon, yet laced with denial's sharp edge. He collapsed to one knee in the snow, a hand pressed to his side where dark blood seeped through fingers. Wounded, not by these hunters, but something deeper, a curse perhaps, or the weight of a crown too heavy for one soul. The ferals paused in their assault, heads turning toward him with a reverence that bordered on ritual. The brute wolf nosed at his shoulder, a low whine escaping its throat, as if recognizing kin long lost to the wild. The alpha, Kingthorn Blackridge, though she did not yet know his name, lifted his head, breath ragged, and met her stare again. "You," he rasped, voice like gravel under boot, carrying across the din. "They kneel for you." The hunter lunged then, blade arcing toward her, but Thorn surged forward with a roar that shook the pines. He intercepted the strike, steel clashing against his own hidden dagger, the impact sending him reeling. Blood sprayed, warm flecks against her cheek, and Kaelin recoiled, the intimacy of it stirring a nausea born of shared peril. Who was he? A fugitive king, marked by the guilt of a fallen realm, his presence here no coincidence but the Deuce's cruel weave. Stories had reached even the exiles. Thorn, the melancholic ruler of the northern holds, haunted by the betrayal that cost his mate's life, his pack shattered by civil war. Ethical to a fault, they said, yet broken, wandering borders in self-imposed penance. The pack rallied around them both now, driving the remaining hunters into retreat, their cries fading into the wind like echoes of defeat. Thorn slumped against the same pine that sheltered her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his fevered skin, smell the copper of his wounds mingling with pine and earth. Kaelin's heart hammered. A war between flight and this inexplicable draw. Fear whispered to leave him, another chain, another demand on her fractured spirit. But curiosity held her, tracing the lines of pain etched into his face, the way his gray eyes softened, searching hers for something unspoken. "You command them," he murmured, wincing as he shifted, the snow around him darkening. "Ferals, untamed by any alpha's will. How?" His voice held no accusation, only a quiet wonder, laced with the melancholy of one who had lost faith in miracles. Kaelin touched the pendant, its silver now flecked with her blood, and his, a bridge she hadn't sought. The moon watched, silent witness, as the wind carried the distant weavos of the pack settling, guardians in the night. She knelt beside him, hesitation warring with the pull in her blood. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice a thread in the cold. "They chose me, as if I were more." The words tasted foreign, stirring the embers of a power she had always denied, the Omega's hidden fire, not submission, but quiet sovereignty. Thorn's hand brushed hers, accidental yet electric, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the frost. Connection sparked, denied by the walls of her exile, born from the fear of entanglement and the curiosity of what redemption might look like in eyes so like her own, storm-tossed and seeking. The night deepened, the pack forming a circle of watchful shadows, and in that fragile truce, Kaelin felt the first threads of a bond weave through the pain, resistant yet inevitable. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's mouth yawned like a wound in the mountainside, jagged rocks framing the entrance where moonlight pooled in silver rivulets. Kaelin supported Thorn's weight as they slipped inside, the feral pack fanning out to guard the perimeter, their amber eyes winking like distant stars before vanishing into the shadowed tree line. The air within was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient moss, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked snow outside, a sanctuary carved by time, indifferent to the exiles it harbored. Her arm throbbed from the arrow's graze, a shallow furrow that wept red into her sleeve, but it was nothing compared to the fever radiating from him, his body a furnace against her side. She eased him down onto a ledge of flat stone, the pendant swinging free to brush his chest. Its blood-flecked surface catching the faint glow from a crevice high above, where the moon's light filtered through like a hesitant blessing. Thorn's breath came in shallow rasps, his storm-gray eyes half-lidded, tracing her face with the intensity that made her skin prickle. "We can't stay long," she murmured, tearing a strip from her cloak to bind his wound. The fabric darkened instantly, absorbing the seep of crimson that spoke of deeper injuries, slashes from claws or blades hidden beneath his torn shirt. Her fingers worked methodically, but each press against his flesh sent unwelcome sparks through her, an instinctive hum in her blood that she shoved down, rationalizing it as the adrenaline's cruel jest. He caught her wrist gently, his touch calloused yet deliberate, halting her. The hunters will return with more. Your pack. They hold the line, but dawn brings their full wrath. His voice was a low rumble, etched with the melancholy of commands long given in vain. Guilt shadowed his features, lines carved by years of a throne that demanded mercy he could no longer afford. Kaelin pulled away, not harshly, but enough to reclaim space, her heart a tangle of wariness and that insidious curiosity. Who was this Alpha stumbling into her exile like a ghost from the old tales? King Thorn Blackridge. The name had surfaced in her mind during the fray, pieced from whispers of northern courts fractured by betrayal. His mate slain in a rival's ambush, his hold splintered by civil strife, leaving him a wanderer bound by ethical chains he refused to break. Yet here he was, defending an Omega stranger, as if her quiet authority mirrored some fracture in his soul. The pack's distant growls filtered through the stone, a vigilant chorus against the wind's rising howl. Kaelin busied herself gathering brittle branches from the cave floor, striking flint from Thorn's discarded dagger to coax a flame. Sparks danced, then bloomed into fire, its golden tongue licking the chill from the air, casting flickering shadows that played across his pale skin. He watched her, silent at first, the warmth drawing beads of sweat to his brow. "You bind wounds like one who has known too many," he said finally. Not a question, but an observation. His gaze lingering on the scar peeking from her collar, a mark from her own pack's indifference when a fever had raged unchecked because she was deemed unworthy of the healer's full care. She fed the fire another twig, the crackle filling the pause. Exile teaches survival, rejection. It sharpens the edges. The words escaped unbidden, raw as the cold that still clung to her bones. Empathy stirred uninvited, a bridge across the chasm of their separate pains. Hers the sting of false treason, his the weight of a crown stained by loss. She met his eyes, finding not pity, but recognition, a shared melancholy that tugged at the walls she'd built. The pendant warmed against her chest, as if the Deusa approved this fragile communion, the blood on its surface now a dried crust binding their fates. Outside, the night erupted anew. Shouts echoed, sharper this time, accompanied by the thud of hooves. Reinforcements from the border clans, their torches blooming like malignant flowers in the dark. The ferals met them with savagery, snarls intertwining with human cries. The clash, a visceral symphony that reverberated through the cave walls. Kaelin tensed, rising to peer from the entrance, but Thorn's hand found her arm again, steadying. "They fight for you. Let them." His grip was firm, not possessive, but protective, born of the Alpha's instinct tempered by guilt's restraint. In that moment, as a wolf's triumphant howl pierced the din, she felt the shift, fear ebbing into something warmer, a bond forged in the crucible of shared peril. Not love, not yet. That would demand too much of her shattered trust. But empathy, yes, weaving through the denial like roots through frost-hardened soil. He shifted, wincing, and she returned to his side, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead. The fever made his skin scalding, his scent intensifying, earth and storm laced with the faint underlying sorrow of isolation. "Why are you here in the wilds?" she asked, voice soft against the fire's murmur, curiosity overriding caution. Thorn's eyes darkened, memories surfacing like ghosts under the moon. Penance, my choices. They led to blood on my hands. A rival's blade took my mate. But it was my blindness that opened the gate. I wander to atone, seeking no throne, only the Deusa's judgment. His confession hung heavy, a mirror to her own exile, the false charge that masked deeper pack politics, where her quiet dissent had threatened fragile alliances. She traced the pendant's edge, its wolf jaws seeming to clench tighter, a symbol of sovereignty denied. The battle outside waned, the hunters' retreat marked by fading echoes, leaving the pack to prowl victorious. In the cave's hush, Kalen felt the bond deepen, empathy transforming into a tentative alliance. His hand rested near hers by the fire, not touching, but close enough to share warmth. A choice resisted, yet accepted in the silence. Strength, she thought, was not in fang or crown, but in choosing mercy amid the storm. The moon's light waned through the crevice, casting their shadows entwined as the wind whispered promises of trials yet to come. Dawn's first pallor crept at the edges, but in that stolen refuge, Kalen glimpsed redemption's fragile spark, not as reward, but as the hard-won proof of souls finding harbor in the wild. As Dawn's gray fingers clawed at the cave's mouth, Kalen felt the pendant pulse against her skin like a second heartbeat, its silver warmed not by firelight, but by something stirring deeper within. Thorn lay still beside her on the stone ledge, his fever breaking in fits of sweat that gleamed like dew on his brow. The fire's embers casting ruddy shadows across the scars mapping his chest, marks of battles won and trusts shattered. The pack's low whines echoed from outside, a restless vigil against the encroaching light. Their loyalty a tether she still questioned, as if her blood on the relic had woven an unintended spell. She rose quietly, the graze on her arm a dull ache now, bandaged with scraps from his cloak. Stepping toward the entrance, she inhaled the crisp bite of morning air laced with pine and the faint, acrid residue of last night's violence. The snow beyond lay trampled and stained, bodies of hunters half buried like fallen sentinels, the ferals circling them with deliberate sniffs, not in hunger, but in judgment. Her stomach twisted at the sight. These wild ones, once myths of mindless savagery, now her unwitting shield. What had she unleashed? The pendant grew heavier, its wolf jaws seeming to bite into her flesh, drawing a fresh bead of blood that trickled warm down her collarbone. A tremor ran through the earth, subtle at first, like the mountain's sigh. Kalen steadied herself against the rock, her vision blurring at the edges, colors sharpening unnaturally. The snow's glacial white, the crimson flecks frozen in place, the distant peaks etched in steel gray against a sky-bruising purple. Then it came, a flood of sensation, not sight, but knowing, as if the Diusa peeled back the veil of her exile to reveal hidden veins beneath the world. Paths unfolded in her mind, not maps of stone and trail, but threads of fate. Loyalties frayed like thorns fractured realm, the border pack's simmering betrayals coiling toward her old home, and deeper still, the feral's ancient bond to something lost, a spiritual compass shattered by alphas who claimed dominion over the wild. She gasped, knees buckling, the revelation crashing like a wave of ice water. This was no mere instinct. It was the Pathfinder's gift, whispered in Omega lore as a curse or blessing, the ability to trace the soul's true course amid deception and despair. Her mother's pendant had been its key, passed in silence, dormant until rejection cracked her open like frost on a frozen river. Blood from her wound mingled with the relic's surface, and suddenly the pack stirred as one, heads lifting toward her with eyes that glowed not amber, but silvered, mirroring the moon's echo, even in daylight's pallor. Thorn's voice cut through the haze, ragged but urgent. "Kalen, what is it?" He had risen, pain etching his features, but his storm-gray eyes burned with clarity, drawn to her as if she were the fire's source. He reached her side, his hand hovering near her shoulder, the air between them humming with unspoken tension. She turned, meeting his gaze, and in that instant, the gift surged outward, a vision shared, unbidden. He stiffened, breath catching, as fragments of his own destiny flickered into focus through her. The rival alpha's shadow lengthening over his northern holds. A betrayal rooted not in ambition, but in a forgotten oath to the Diusa. And at its heart, a path to redemption, not through war, but through an Omega's quiet sovereignty, one who could guide the wild and the broken back to unity. You see it, she whispered, voice trembling with the weight of it, the cave's chill forgotten in the heat of revelation. Her fingers closed around the pendant, blood smearing anew, and the ferals pressed closer to the entrance, their forms blurring at the edges as if the earth's pulse synced with hers. Thorn's face paled, not in fear, but in the raw ache of recognition. The guilt that had driven him into exile now reframed, her gift illuminating how his choices had severed the spiritual ties binding Pack to Wild, Alpha to Deusa. The Pathfinder, he murmured, the words ancient, laced with reverence and sorrow. They spoke of it in the old temples, an Omega who charts the soul's true north, mending what power breaks. I sought atonement in shadows, but you are the light I denied. The bond twisted deeper, no longer just empathy, but a visceral pull, resisted by the scars of her rejection. The false treason that had stripped her voice, the Pack's eyes that saw her as lesser. Yet here, in this revelation, curiosity yielded to a fragile acceptance, her heart fracturing open to the possibility that her exile was not punishment, but preparation. Thorn stepped closer, his scent enveloping her, storm and earth, now threaded with hope's faint spark. His hand finally touched hers, calluses rough against her palm, igniting a warmth that spread like fire through blood. My destiny was ruin, he confessed, voice breaking on the edge of dawn's light, until the wild led me to you. The ferals pledged not to ferocity, but to this, to the guide who sees beyond the crown's lies. Outside the wind rose, carrying weavos that wove through the mountains like a prayer, the Pack's chorus affirming the unveiling. But doubt lingered in Kaelin's chest, a ethical thorn. Was this gift a chain, binding her to his redemption and the wars it might unleash? Or freedom, the Deuce's proof that strength lay in illuminating paths others feared? The pendant cooled against her skin, its jaws now slack, as if the wolf within had found its moon. Thorn's eyes held hers, melancholic yet resolute, the Alpha's ethical core recognizing her not as salvation's prize, but as the moral compass he had lost. As the first rays pierced the cave, gilding the bloodied snow and gold, Kaelin felt the world's threads tighten around them. Destiny's revelation not a balm, but a call to choose between the isolation she knew and the union that demanded her light. The Pack settled at her feet, guardians of the path unveiled, while Thorn's presence beside her whispered of redemptions, intertwined, fragile as the frost yielding to sun. In that moment, under the fading moon's watchful eye, she glimpsed not just his fate, but hers, reborn not in vengeance, but in the quiet power to guide the storm home. The sun climbed higher, its pale light fracturing through the pines like shards of indifferent glass, but the chill lingered in Kaelin's bones as she and Thorn emerged from the cave. The ferals flanked them, a silent phalanx of shadow and sinew, their paws leaving no trace on the snow, as if the earth itself conspired to shield their path. Her arm burned beneath the makeshift bandage, a reminder of the night's toll, but it paled against the weight of the revelation still humming in her veins. The Pathfinder's gift, a compass of soul threads that pulled her toward truths she had long buried. Thorn walked beside her, his steps measured, the fever's flush faded, but the pallor of his skin, speaking of wounds that festered beyond flesh. His gray eyes scanned the horizon, melancholic vigilance etched in every line, as if the Deuce's unveiling had stripped him bare, forcing him to confront the king he had forsaken. They moved southward, toward the borderland's jagged fringe, drawn by the gift's insistent tug, a vision of her old Pack's encampment, where the false treason's architect waited. The rival Alpha, Garrick Ironclaw, had woven the lie that exiled her. Whispers of her disloyalty to undermine the fragile alliances. His ambition, a serpent coiled around the northern holds. Through Thorn's shared sight, she saw it now. Garrick's betrayal intertwined with the king's past, the same ambush that slew Thorn's mate, orchestrated to fracture loyalties, paving the way for a coup that threatened all packs under the moon. Freedom or entanglement. The choice gnawed at her, the pendant's wolf jaws a cold bite against her chest, smeared with their mingled blood, urging her forward like a reluctant oracle. The wind carried the first warning, distant horns, low and mournful, slicing through the mountain's hush. Kaelin's heart stuttered, the gift sharpening the sounds into clarity. Pack calls, not of hunt, but assembly. The border clans rallying under Garrick's banner. "They come for you," Thorn murmured, his voice a gravel thread, hand brushing her elbow in a touch that sparked denial's fire. She pulled away, the instinctive pull toward him clashing with the exile's scar. Love as chain, binding her to another alpha's redemption when her own sovereignty was so newly claimed. "Not just me," she replied, breath fogging the air, her silver eyes meeting his with a resolve born of revelation. "For all of us. The paths converge here. Your guilt, my banishment. We face it, or it devours the wild." The trail descended into a narrow ravine, walls of ice-sheathed rock rising like silent judges, the snow crunching underfoot with each step, a echo of impending fracture. The ferals tensed, ears pricked, their low growls vibrating through the stone as the horns swelled closer. Then the ambush unfolded. Figures crested the ridge above, 24 strong, armored in steel etched with ironclaw runes, their torches sputtering against the midday pallor. At their fore rode Garrick, broad and brutal, his fur cloak matted with frost, eyes like coals under a brow scarred by old victories. Beside him slunk the traitor from her pack, Lyra, once a sister in whispers, now her accuser, face twisted in false righteousness, the scent of ambition sour on the wind. Kaelin halted, the ravine trapping the cold air thick around them, her pulse a thunder in her ears. The pendant burned hot now, blood from a fresh prick of its edge trickling down her skin. And the gift surged, a web of loyalties laid bare. Garrick's ambition stemmed not from pure malice, but desperation. His own mate lost to Thorn's overlooked borders, a grudge festering into war. Lyra's betrayal? Fear of the Omega's quiet influence, the subtle sway that threatened her climb. Thorn stiffened at her side, his hand drifting to the dagger at his belt, ethical restraint warring with the Alpha's roar building in his chest. "Garrick!" he called, voice carrying like wind over peaks, resonant with the melancholy of old wounds. "This ends not in blood, but truth. The Deusa binds us, your loss mirrors mine, but vengeance blinds the path." The rival laughed, a bark that echoed off the ice, his pack fanning out along the ridge, bows drawn, the metallic tang of oiled strings sharp in the air. "Truth? From a king who wanders like a whipped cur? And you, Omega, trespasser turned feral queen? The wilds claimed you for your treason. Now we'll finish it." An arrow loosed, whistling past Kaelin's ear to embed in the snow at her feet, the vibration sending a shiver through the earth. The ferals erupted, surging up the slopes in a blur of fangs and fury, clashing with the front line in a spray of red against white. Bodies tumbled, snarls intertwining with cries, the ravine's walls amplifying the visceral storm, hot blood steaming on cold stone, the copper scent mingling with pine's resin. Thorn moved to shield her, blade flashing as a warrior leaped down, but Kaelin stepped forward, the gift igniting her voice. "Stop!" The command rippled outward, not as alpha thunder, but omega clarity, threading through the chaos like moonlight on water. The ferals paused mid-leap, Garrick's pack faltering, confusion rippling their ranks. Lyra dismounted, blade drawn, eyes wide with the fear of exposure. "You were nothing!" she spat, circling closer, her steps crunching betrayals into the snow. "A whisperer in shadows, plotting against us all. I saved the pack from your poison." The pendant pulsed, and Kaelin extended her hand, blood dripping from it to stain the ground. A ritual unbidden, the deuce's vein. Visions flooded, Lyra's hand in the false missive, not out of hate but survival, her own exile looming if Kaelin's influence grew. "You chose fear over sisterhood," Kaelin said, voice steady amid the din, the wind whipping her hair like a banner. "But the paths fork here. Forgive the lie, or let war claim us all." Thorn's gaze bored into her, his ethical core alight with the moral precipice. Strike down the rival, reclaim his throne through vengeance, or yield to her light, choosing compassion's uncertain crown. Garrick charged then, axe raised, the clash a thunderclap as Thorn met him, steel singing against steel, sparks flying like fallen stars. Kaelin darted between, the ferals forming a barrier, her gift weaving a fragile truce. Illusions of shared loss flickering in the attackers' minds, mates' ghosts whispering mercy. Lyra lunged at her back, blade grazing her shoulder, pain blooming hot and wet. But Kaelin turned, grasping the traitor's wrist. "Freedom or chains!" she gasped, the words of philosophy carved in blood. "Choose!" The woman froze, eyes fracturing with doubt, the knife clattering to the snow. Garrick staggered back from Thorn's parry, chest heaving, the alpha's melancholy gaze locking on Kaelin's. Recognition dawning, the deuce's threads binding their fractures. The rival lowered his axe, not in defeat, but pause, the pack's growls ebbing as the wind carried a lone howl from the peaks, the moon's echo even in daylight. Blood pooled at their feet, the ravine's floor a canvas of choice, war's red tide or forgiveness's fragile peace. Kaelin sagged against Thorn, his arm encircling her waist. Support, not possession, the bond deepening in the aftermath. Resisted yet embraced as the ethical flame. Love or liberty? The dilemma hung, unresolved, as the ferals circled protectively, guardians of the judgment's uneasy dawn. The sun dipped toward afternoon, casting long shadows that merged their forms, whispering of sacrifices yet to come, where power bowed to compassion's quiet reign. In the silence broken only by ragged breaths, she felt the world's pulse sync with hers, the path forward a moral forge, testing if redemption could heal what betrayal had torn. The ravine's silence fell like a shroud, heavy with the steam of spilled blood rising from the snow, mingling with the metallic bite of iron and the faint underlying rot of thawing earth. Kaelin's shoulder throbbed where Lyra's blade had kissed her skin, a shallow gash that wept crimson in slow rivulets soaking into the fur of her cloak like accusations unspoken. She leaned into Thorn's steady frame, his arm a reluctant anchor around her waist, not claiming, but holding the fracture of the moment together. The ferals stood sentinel, their breaths fogging the chill air in unison, amber eyes fixed on the ridge where Garrick's pack wavered. Weapons lowered, but grips white-knuckled, the wind carrying their ragged exhales like confessions dragged from the depths. Garrick dismounted with a grunt, his axe thudding into the snow beside him, the rival alpha's broad form casting a long shadow that stretched toward them like a tentative bridge. His coal-black eyes, rimmed with the red of unshed rage, flicked from Thorn to Kaelin, tracing the bloodied pendant that dangled between them, its wolf jaws now crusted with the evidence of their shared trials. Lyra knelt in the trampled white, her dropped knife half buried, face pale as the frost, the traitor's mask cracked to reveal the hollow fear beneath. Not villainy, but the desperate clawing of one who had chosen survival over soul. The gift hummed in Kaelin's veins, a quiet current illuminating the threads. Garrick's grudge born of a mate's unmarked grave, Thorn's blindness in the old wars that had left borders porous, her own exile the spark that ignited this convergence. Paths not of conquest, but convergence, where power's illusions yielded to the deuce's unyielding weave. Thorn's breath warmed her temple, his voice a low murmur against the wind's dying whine. "This truce, it's yours, Kaelin. The light you carry, It mends what I broke." His words carried the weight of his melancholy, the ethical king who had wandered in guilt's shadow, now glimpsing a horizon beyond atonement. Yet she felt the resistance coil in her core, the Omega's fire flaring against the pull. Love as redemption tempted, but liberty's call sharper, a reminder that union might eclipse the sovereignty she had only just claimed. The pendant pulsed, drawing another bead of her blood to its surface, and the earth responded with a subtle tremor, as if the wild itself urged her toward the precipice. Garrick stepped forward, boots crunching the crimson-streaked snow, his pack parting like mist before a storm. "You speak of paths, Omega," he rumbled, voice gravel thick with the North's ancient burr, eyes narrowing on the relic that bound her wounds to Thorn's fate. "But blood demands blood. Thorn's neglect cost me everything, my mate's throat torn in the shadows he failed to guard, and you. Your whispers sowed doubt in the packs, turning loyalty to ash." Lyra rose unsteadily behind him, wiping snow from her hands, her gaze darting to Kaelin with a mix of defiance and plea, the air between them thick with the unspoken plea for absolution. Kaelin straightened, pulling from Thorn's hold despite the ache that lanced through her shoulder, the cold seeping deeper into her bones like doubt's insidious frost. The ferrules shifted, a ripple of low growls underscoring her steps as she advanced into the ravine's heart, the sun's pale rays gilding the blood at her feet in fleeting gold. "Blood circles back," she said, her voice steady, threaded with the Pathfinder's clarity. A poise not born of alpha command, but the quiet authority of one who had walked rejection's edge. "Your vengeance blinds you to the Deusa's design. Garrick, your loss mirrors his. Thorn's guilt forged this fracture, but war will only widen it, leaving the wild baron and the packs as ghosts." She extended her hand, palm up, the fresh blood from the pendant dripping to the snow, staining it with dark petals that seemed to pulse like veins under the earth's skin. The rival alpha halted, his breath catching as the gift wove outward. Unbidden visions flickering in his eyes. His mate's final howl echoing through unsecured borders. Thorn's ethical hesitation in council that had prioritized mercy over might. And now, the Omega's light revealing a shared thread. A forgotten pact with the Wild Ones, severed by Alpha's pride that her presence alone could restore. Lyra gasped, clutching her throat as her own betrayal surfaced. The forged missive, not malice, but a desperate bid to secure her place amid the pack's shifting sands, fearing Kaelin's subtle influence would unseat her fragile rise. The wind stilled, the ravine's walls holding the moment in crystalline hush, Weavos distant from the peaks like the Deusa's solemn choir. Thorn moved to her side, his presence a warm counterpoint to the ice, but he held back. Gray eyes shadowed with the moral weight of surrender. "I offer no crown," he said to Garrick, voice resonant with the sorrow of a king unthroned. "Only truth. Let her guide us, compassion over conquest, or we all fall to the storm we wrought." The words hung, a philosophy etched in the air. Strength not in the blade's edge, but in choosing the harder mercy, where power bowed to the soul's true north. Garrick's hand trembled on his axe, the pack's murmurs rising like a tide, but then he knelt, not in submission, but reverence, the snow yielding beneath him as the ferrules echoed the motion, their forms a living circle of pledge. Lyra followed, tears carving tracks down her cheeks, the traitor whispering, "Forgive, I chose wrong." Kaelin's heart fractured open, the resistance crumbling under the flood of acceptance. Not immediate bliss, but a hard-won union, her liberty woven into their redemptions without erasure. She touched the pendant, its warmth spreading through her like dawn's first thaw, binding sacrifice to cure, her blood the seal, Thorn's guilt the forge, Garrick's rage the anvil yielding to peace. Yet as the packs converged in uneasy alliance, Scout's horns blared from the north, Thorn's fractured holds under full assault, the rivals' coup cresting like a wave of steel and fire. The choice crystallized, flee into the wild's embrace, preserving her sovereignty alone, or stand with them, her gift the beacon to heal the realm's wounds at the cost of her unscarred heart. Thorn's hand found hers, fingers intertwining with a gentleness that pierced her denial, his eyes holding the promise of shared rebirth. The sun dipped lower, casting the ravine in twilight's blue, blood and snow merging into rivers of possibility, as Kaelin felt the Deuce's whisper, redemption not his end, but the eternal proving ground, where love's proof demanded the soul's full surrender. The ferals howled as one, a call to the unfolding storm, and in that visceral echo, Kaelin glimpsed the Renascimento's edge, not victory's crown, but the fragile union of broken souls, where compassion's flame outshone the fires of war. The northern holds burned under a sky bruised with smoke, the wind carrying the acrid bite of charred timber and the distant thunder of clashing steel, as if the Deusa herself wept embers into the frost. Kaelin stood at the ravine's edge, the pendant heavy against her chest, its wolf jaws crusted with the layered blood of choices made and unmade, hers, Thorn's, even the faint smear from Garrick's grudging oath. The sun had surrendered to twilight's indigo veil, the moon rising fat and silver, casting the converging armies in stark relief. Thorn's loyalists, ragged banners whipping like wounds, facing Garrick's ironclad ranks swollen by opportunistic clans, their torches a sea of flickering malice. The ferals prowled the flanks, shadows unbound, their howls weaving through the chaos like threads of the wild reclaiming its due. Her shoulder's gash pulsed with each heartbeat, a hot reminder of Lyra's blade, now sheathed in reluctant peace at her side, the traitor-turned ally, eyes hollow with the cost of forgiveness. Kaelin felt the Pathfinder's gift surge, a luminous ache in her core, mapping the soul threads amid the fray. Thorn's guilt as the root of division, his ethical mercy once twisted into weakness by rivals' cunning. Garrick's rage a mirror, forged in loss but blind to the Deuce's interconnected weave. And her own exile, the false treason a catalyst, her quiet sovereignty the key to mending what power had rent. Yet the pull toward Thorn twisted deeper, no longer resisted, but tested. Love as redemption's proof, demanding she surrender isolation's fragile liberty for union's uncertain forge. He stood beside her. The king unthroned yet unbroken, his cloak torn and bloodied from the ravine's skirmish, gray eyes reflecting the moon's cold fire. His hand brushed hers, calluses rough as mountain stone, igniting a warmth that spread through her veins like liquid silver, rationalized no longer but accepted in the storm's raw honesty. "The holds fall if we divide," he murmured, voice a low rumble against the wind's howl, melancholy laced with resolve. "Your light, Kaelin, it charts the path I couldn't see, but the choice, it's yours. Lead us to war's end, or claim the wild alone." The words hung, a moral precipice. Sacrifice her gift to heal the realm, binding her to his side in a crown of shared burdens, or retreat into the forbidden grounds. Her sovereignty intact, but the pacts doomed to endless fracture. The armies clashed below, a visceral storm of fang and blade, ferals leaping into the melee, their savagery tempered by her unspoken will, tearing through armor with roars that shook the snow from ledges. Blood sprayed in arcs, steaming on the white expanse. The copper tang thick as the cries of the fallen rose like prayers unanswered. Garrick charged the center, axe cleaving a path toward Thorn's banners, his pack a tide of steel and fury. But Lyra's voice cut through, rallying defectors with tales of the Omega's vision, threads of doubt unraveling loyalties, turning blades inward. Kaelin stepped forward, the pendant burning against her skin, drawing fresh blood that trickled warm down her collarbone, a ritual seal awakening the gift's full torrent. She raised her arms, the moon's light bathing her in ethereal silver, and the world stilled, not in silence, but in revelation's hush. Visions flooded outward, unbidden and inexorable. To the attackers, ghosts of mates and siblings lost to old wars, whispering of mercy's harder strength. To Thorn's defenders, the Deuce's ancient pact with the wild, severed by Alpha's pride, now restored through an Omega's unyielding clarity. Garrick faltered mid-swing, his axe lowering as his mate's final gaze pierced his rage, the grudge crumbling like frost under sun. The ferals circled the battlefield's heart, not devouring but herding, their forms blurring into a living mandala under the lunar gaze, Weavos harmonizing with the wind's lament. Kaelin descended into the fray, Thorn at her flank, his presence a shield of ethical fire. No possessive claim, but partnership forged in the crucible. A warrior lunged at her, blade arcing with the desperation of one bound by false oaths, but she met his eyes, the gift weaving truth. His brother's death not at Thorn's hand, but in the shadows of Garrick's ambition. He dropped his sword, kneeling in the bloodied snow, the ripple spreading like fire through dry tinder. Pain lanced her side as an arrow grazed true, hot and tearing, but Thorn's roar deflected the next, his dagger flashing in defense born of guilt's redemption. She pressed on, blood mingling with snow at her feet, each step a choice. Liberty's solitude or love's redemptive union, where compassion crowned the fallen. At the battle's core, Garrick faced her, chest heaving, axe trembling in his grip. "End it, Pathfinder," he growled, voice cracking on the edge of surrender, the moon etching his scars in silver. "Your light blinds as it reveals my vengeance." It was chains, not justice. Behind him, Lyra stood with the ferals, her face streaked with tears and soot, the traitor's redemption a quiet vow to guard the paths she once poisoned. Kaelin touched the pendant, its jaws now slack in release, and extended her bloodied palm. "Union heals what exile breaks," she said, voice resonant amid the dying clash. The wind carrying her words like the Deuce's breath. Not as reward, but proof, power yields to the soul's true north. Garrick knelt, the gesture cascading through his ranks, blades sheathing as the feral's howls peaked in triumph, a spiritual chorus binding wild to pack under the moon's unblinking eye. Thorn drew her close, his arm encircling her waist against the wound's fire. Their bond sealed not in passion's haste, but the slow thaw of acceptance, love as the ultimate moral choice, transcending hierarchies in rebirth's embrace. The hold's flames guttered, smoke curling skyward like offerings, the snow blanketing the fallen in merciful white. Kaelin sagged into him, exhaustion mingling with the profound ache of sovereignty shared, her gift dimming to a steady glow, the pendant cooling as the Deuce's weave tightened. In the hush that followed, as dawn's first light gilded the bloodied field, she felt the Renascimento take root. Not sacrifice's void, but healing's union, where rejection birthed destiny's quiet reign. The packs gathered, ferals weaving among them like living symbols of the wild reclaimed, and Thorn's lips brushed her temple, a promise whispered against the wind. Together, we are the storm's end. Her heart, once fractured by exile, beat in rhythm with his, the moon fading as the sun rose, illuminating paths of compassion over conquest, faith over despair. Strength, she knew now, was choosing this, redemption's flame, eternal and unyielding. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.